You're listening to the Pro Status Podcast.
And welcome back to another Pro Status Podcast.
Yeah, look at our visual vibes.
You need to talk closer to the microphone there.
If you're... I'm in media. I know how to do this. We're turning the lights down today. We're talking about a serious topic.
I know it's like more of a serious topic, but just the bright light wasn't doing it for me right now. So, Jesse's mic stand's falling apart there. Okay, so one of the topics that I wanted to talk about today is I've seen this pop up on the forums quite a bit and responded to a couple of them, but it's basically who makes the call, and I'll go into that a little bit more.
One of our favorite forums.
Yeah. The question was basically who makes the call on how it sounds. And is that the front of house guy? Is that the worship pastor? Is that potentially the production manager, tech director? Is that...
This is mostly in the context of church. I mean, because this is where
very church.
It's a lot more confusing. And I think that's probably one of the comparisons we should probably talk about.
Yeah.
Is that difference? Because in the church, we have weird titles. And it's so confusing. Well,
and so I actually recently was talking with a couple of churches about this and like how to arrange your staff, your volunteers, but like that leadership, like top-down view. And I think that kind of can go into answering the question of who makes the call. And it's actually strategically putting people in places to make those calls, and then there won't be any of those questions. So I think the question is not just who should make the call. It goes way back to the beginning. And you can take a lot of like stuff like you're mentioning from like the secular industry. If, me, I have an event and I'm paying Jesse to come mix, for example, I'm either paying Jesse to come mix because I like how he sounds, like his sound that he makes, or two, I'm paying him to come mix for how I want it to sound. There's going to be one or two options, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
But if I'm hiring him for my event, usually that conversation is like part of the contract. It's part of the discussion of, hey, I want you to come mix this. Do you think you can make it sound like this? And, it's a yes or no question, a yes or no answer. Yeah. Or, hey, I want you to come work this event for me. I love how you mix. Can you just come do your thing?
I actually think there's a lot of, I almost said house of worship places, but also venues where they've just eliminated staff entirely and only went contract purely to eliminate the staffing and conversation problems. Yeah. And that way they can just kind of pick and choose, which is just that's polarizing for me. Like, wow, that's...
Well, I think
how do you build like community,
Yeah. The question that I saw, I think, was from that of we're paying an outsider, a contractor, to mix every Sunday morning. He wants to mix how he thinks it should sound, but we think it should sound different. Mm-hmm. Who makes the call? What do we do? And in that specific question, I would say, well, you're paying him. That conversation should be had of, hey, we want it to sound like this. And if he feels like he can't do that or doesn't want to do that, well, then maybe you're at the point where you need to find a different contractor.
Yeah. And then, if you're really picky, that's when a staff person makes sense. Yeah. You develop your sound that works for you guys. And let's talk about this though, because that conversation can go forever.
Yeah.
But how many people have the pastor mixing, telling them how to mix from the front row?
Yes.
Let's talk about that dynamic.
And so that's where I think it goes into that whole like building your team, whether that is staff or volunteers, because yes, there is a lot of places where like the pastor or the worship pastor is like, make it sound like this, or should, do this, whatever. And at some point you have to...
I'm sorry. We had a church once that I can't say who it is, obviously, but the pastor took acoustic paneling off the walls because he felt like it made it more lively, which could be true, but literally they didn't have enough anyway, and they took them down because he felt like the audience sang louder. There
is like that fine line, but like that's just at that point, if you don't have enough acoustic treatment and your room's already too lively, then that's like a mixed change. Like,
it was just really weird. The pastor just refused. He's like, no, it's the paneling. I'm going to take them down.
Okay.
I'm like, man, most churches are just killing to have an acoustic budget.
Right.
You know?
Which, and I will say, at the end of the day, we're there to serve the goal of the church. And if the senior pastor is over the church, it's
true.
And if it sounds bad and your pastor's doing something like that, then that's on your pastor. Ultimately, that's not on you. But that opens up a whole world of conversation to be had for something like that. Like, if that's actually happening, like, it's time to have a conversation.
Yeah.
At that point.
The mixing one is fun because it's not too complex and it's a real relatable problem for people. And I know even in a corporate or contract live stage environment, you got your client, you got a PM, you might have a creative director.
Yep.
There's all these different chiefs. So it's like, who is the big chief?
Yeah.
Ultimately it's the guy who signs your check.
Yep.
However, there's quite the art.
Yeah.
Of the chain of command, like there's this military style chain of command that happens where you can still honor all of it. And it all usually is based on relationship, communication, and our response. How professional are we in responding? And it's like, how do we say yes without running everyone over? Or, you know what I mean? How does this impact other people?
Right.
And I think that's the pro part, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think there could be the pro part from both sides. The contractor who's coming in, and then also from the person that's hiring him. One of the things that I always tell pastors that I meet with is that you need to give examples to your people on staff, your people volunteer, because like it's that leading by example. But like if you don't give examples of what you want the outcome to be, like how's it gonna get there? And that could be, if it's mixing, it's, hey, I want it to sound like this, and there's a whole other can of worms of like
language.
What's your
I would say language, how do you even communicate it? But
right, and then also like what's your band like, because that affects your mix.
Talent.
But like, I want it to look like this, I want the lighting to look like this, I want the video to look like this, and actually giving those examples. And so from the pro side of things, it would be, if I'm hiring Jesse, hey Jesse, I want you to come mix our Sunday services.
Hi, I'd love to. How do you want it to sound?
I would love it to sound like this. And then that opens up that conversation more of like, this is the kind of the sound that we're going for. Here's a couple of examples.
Usually the topics are what, like overall volume, if there's a hard limit.
Yep.
Which, I mean, that's not even a great question, but it's a good starting point. But then subs, like,
how
like it bumping.
Yeah, and then every room's gonna be tuned different. Everything's gonna sound different, But I will say this: a bad band or a bad mix loud is even worse. And so, that whole loudness conversation is just 86 dB. We were at a church actually, who was running it at like 95 dB, 94, 95, and was an old PA, and we just put in a new PA. And they were like, we want to hear it at 94, and I'm like, what volume is it now? Like, it's like 85, 86. Turn it up. I'm like, that is just so loud. Like, listening to anything past 92 is just, it hurts your ears. It's so loud.
It's funny.
But even, that's on a good PA. It's like, if you have a good PA and a good band, you can mix a good mix at 86, quieter, and it sounds fantastic.
And that's fascinating. It's so amazing
huge.
How it's a real thing.
It feel huge. And
it feels every bit as huge. Like, I think, for those who are struggling with volume and they're using crappy gear, it's I mean, your 10 dB, your new system gets you almost 10 dB.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be real for people. Like 10 dB is a huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, everything goes back to your system, how it's tuned, your room, how it's treated. Like, all of those play into volume, but I don't know.
Anyway, we
weren't really talking
off topic
about volume.
We're talking about Chiefs in the
little rant.
How many cooks are in the kitchen and who do we listen to?
Yeah, exactly. So going back to that. So I just hired Jesse. Great. But do I have my too many cooks in the kitchen dialed in. So Jesse comes in on a Sunday morning, and if I'm the pastor, there's me. Then I have a worship pastor, and then I might have a tech director. And now there could be 3 of us. This is a bad situation. Now, say there's 3 of us all telling Jesse different things on how we want it to sound on Sunday morning.
My nightmare. Literally, this is relevant in my life at the moment. I had to deal with something similar. So
yeah. And so that, I would say, from the venue, event, church perspective, is the unpro thing. The proper way to be, in my opinion, would be, okay, we're hiring you. You're going to come mix on Sunday. I'm going to introduce you to our tech director. Don't know why he's not in this interview right now, but, I'm going to introduce you to our tech director, and he's going to be giving all the calls on Sunday. Now, myself as the pastor, I need to have that direct relationship with our tech director to where, one, the tech director knows what I want as the pastor. He knows what I want it to sound like, and he's going to bat for me. He's achieving the goals that I want to see because we have that relationship, that connection. Same with the worship pastor. Now, if the 3 of us are all on the same page, a lot of times in churches I know the worship pastor's over the tech director, and then sometimes they work together. I think they need to work together.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should even talk about like what a tech director is. I mean,
yeah,
because what's a production manager versus a tech director?
In the church world, I feel like they can be the same thing.
They are the same thing. In that space, yeah.
In the industry, they're not the same person.
Yeah.
I think.
I think in the industry, like production managers do a lot more budgets and a lot more admin.
Yeah, and I think that's where, when the worship pastor, a lot of times the worship pastor is over the tech director, and that almost makes sense that they are a tech director at that point, because they might not be. I think they're submitting their request to the worship pastor. We want to buy this. We want to do this, and the worship pastor is helping create the budget for the tech team. When they work together, that's more of like production manager, worship pastor, like. The production manager is actually doing all the production work, submitting all the requests, building the budgets himself. Nothing gets submitted to the worship pastor.
Agreed.
They work together to achieve the end goal.
Yeah, so they can share. So that person really can wear both hats.
Yeah,
depending on what you're doing,
and depending on what church you're at and like what you're doing. A lot of times, the production manager / tech director is also fills one of the main roles on a Sunday, mixing front of house, directing, being the LD, they can fill a role on a Sunday beyond being the tech director or the production manager. Which a lot of times, based on due to budget, that is something that you have to do.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think that from setting it up from the pro standpoint from your church is like, it sucks for the contractor that we're hiring to mix if the pastor, worship pastor, tech director, whoever, aren't all on the same page going for the same goal.
Yeah, that person is set up for failure.
Yep.
I mean, they just are. And they're really just being hung out there to
dry.
Yeah, as they say. Don't even understand what that means.
We're making jerky.
Yeah. They're just going to get shriveled up, and I don't know. But
they're getting thrown into the fire.
Yeah, they're getting thrown. That's a better way to say it, I think. And that's just no fun. That's no fun. Yeah. I don't think that's never a win for anybody.
Well, it's a recipe for disaster. Like, you're not, like you said, you're not going to win. There's no good outcome in that scenario. And that's where, it doesn't matter the skill set of the, in our example, Jesse coming into mix. It doesn't matter how good he is. If he's getting feedback from all these different people, and then this is another big topic on this, congregational people coming up to the booth. It sounds too loud. There's too much bass. Like, it's just, that's a recipe for a disaster, which can be eliminated if your core team is on the same page. So
yeah,
again, worship pastor, tech director, all on the same page. One person's giving feedback to your new contractor that you just hired.
I don't think I don't get feedback.
on Sundays.
Yeah. But I'm also doing video.
Yeah.
So, and I'm hard to get to.
I think it also comes from when you have an established team that you've worked with for a long time, there is a lot less feedback. And because we trust you, and I guess it comes down to, for your example, we trust you to do your job, and you're going to do basically what we want. And the minor things that we might want to fix that we didn't like are so minor, it's not even worth bringing up on that day. Right. It's like we will have a conversation after, maybe on Monday, whatever, recap the weekend, and we'll talk about it because they're like, I just didn't like that one shot. That is not worth bringing up in the moment on a Sunday. You know what I mean? Like,
it totally isn't. And that's a good point. I think people, we're contractor or volunteer, we're there to serve. You really got to like, I don't care who your boss is. Like, they have to love people first.
Yeah.
That's in or out of the church. It doesn't matter. You got to serve people first if you want them to serve in that position, paid or not. So putting people first, I think that's like number one priority. Whatever is going to compromise their ability or take away might, if you might make that comment because it feels good for you in the moment, but it can be pretty selfish to put yourself and make your opinion so important that you would take away from the creativity or whatever. Like we have to give feedback sometimes. Like I get that. Mm-hmm. But if you're that important, like you're really just taking away from everybody.
Yeah.
And I have a real problem with that, period. So I think the professional thing is like, if it's not significant, then wait for a meeting. Wait till it's over.
Absolutely.
If it is important, tell the technical director
and let him
be the buffer so that you're not bringing your negative energy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And people, I mean, I hate to say this, some of the biggest jerks when it comes to tech stuff, I'm going to say it, is pastors.
Yep.
And corporate guys are the same way. Like they can be real jerks.
Yeah.
To say it nicely. But pastors are the same way. They think they're entitled to do that. Mm-hmm. Totally breaks my heart.
And
and it comes from an old school. So I don't want to like.
Yeah.
I'm not attacking them, and it comes from this old school idea, and people respond that way because they're wrapped up in passion. They care about what they're doing, and that energy comes from a good place. It's just misdirected or misguided.
Right. Yeah,
and they haven't learned how to communicate in that space.
Well, and that's just establishing the roles and your team at your church or whatever. Because even when I was production managing, even if I wasn't there on a Sunday, which rarely happened, but all of the feedback would still come to me through a text message or a voice memo. They still weren't going to the team just because I wasn't there. Yeah. So the protocol was set and it was always followed. And I think that's like really important that actually happens. That's the first step to the pro status thing, is establishing a protocol.
Yep.
And even down to church members coming up to the booth and making comments. Like we had a protocol for that, which was we had a local pastor that was there on Sundays. He's just like one of the local church pastors that was really good at connecting with everyone. Mm-hmm. And if someone had feedback, it was, the response from anyone in the booth was, thank you for that feedback. We're actually supposed to tell everyone that they, like, all that feedback needs to be going through this pastor. He's here. We're not supposed to change anything until it comes from, top down, essentially. So if you notice something, please go talk to so and so. And I think that worked out really well because it got rid of anyone in the booth feeling uncomfortable.
Yep.
Because they're doing their job, they're doing it to how they think we want it done.
Yep.
And most of the time, to the best of their ability, they're getting that. And some rando comes up and is like, "It's way too loud. The subs are way too loud." It's a lot easier for that person in the booth. This is like, and I tell every church this is like to send thanks for the feedback. I have to do my job. Please go talk to so-and-so if you feel like it's really bad or whatever. And, I've had people fight back with that. And I think that there comes a next stage of that protocol, because if it were me and I'm the production manager, I can handle that conversation a little bit different than if I have a volunteer or a contractor or someone mixing in front of house, So as a production manager, if I heard that going to my front of house guy and they wanted to fight back with the protocoled comment, then that's when I would, as a production manager, would step in and have
that's good.
A nice
I think that's good clarification. I think one thing, slight shift in our conversation here is, what would you do? Actually, so tech directors, so we're talking about like the hierarchy, pastoral relationship, or leader, what that looks like. I think one of the common things I see is a tech director might easily become a micromanager. Yep. So let's talk a little bit about that and culture.
Easy. Yeah.
Especially like paid staff versus volunteer staff. Mm-hmm. Two different dynamics.
Yeah.
But leadership is a huge conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really, really important to differentiate, like, what kind of leader do you want to be? One that's afraid of getting comment and feedback from your staff? And because that's going to flow. Like, if you're afraid, you're going to turn into a micromanager.
Yeah.
If you actually trust your team,
mm-hmm.
Then you just need to trust your team and empower them.
Yeah.
If you don't trust your team, maybe you need to educate them. Like, maybe we got to work on that to where you get to that place.
Well, and I'll say this, like, where was I going with that? When I first took over production manager for Bethel, I got a lot of feedback from the pastoral staff.
Yeah.
Because you changed a lot really quickly.
Yeah.
And so we got a lot of feedback, which is great. I loved the feedback because that told me where to go, and I trusted my team with what their job was and what what I assigned them to do. This mic keeps falling. So I wasn't worried about my team, but I took all of the feedback, and again, this is setting up that priority because I got all that feedback usually on a Sunday.
Yep.
And I would only change what I felt necessary
via text, right?
To change.
Yeah.
In the moment. And that came from establishing trust between the pastors and I. It helped that I had already been there for like 10 years or 9 years or whatever on staff. And so it helped because I already had that relationship with the pastors, even though I wasn't in charge until that moment. But it just came, everything else that they talked about, we talked about, but it was on the Monday after. It was like, all right, guys, this is the feedback that we're getting. Yeah. This is how we're going to fix it. Because, one of the things, and this is like just an example, but I could get hey, the mix is too harsh. And so their feedback could be, it's too harsh, turn it down. But the real right answer might be, the one electric guitar was too loud, causing it to be too harsh. Let's EQ or turn that electric guitar up or down. It's that one little thing that's actually making the mix too harsh. That's just an example. And so it's finding that, like, I'll get the feedback, it's too harsh, turn it down. So then my job is to, all right, before we overreact and turn the whole thing down, what is the one thing that's causing it to be that way? And then let's fix that. You know what I mean? And so that's part of that conversation and why I think there needs to be that buffer between pastorals and your techs, whether they're volunteer or staff.
There really should be. And I think also I would ask, like, how important is it to have a tech director or production manager who knows how to do all things?
It's hard to find it.
Yeah.
It's so hard to find it.
I mean, to be qualified, do you need to?
I would say yes.
I could say both. I could say no. I think you need to have the understanding.
Yes.
I don't think you need skill.
I don't think you need to understand, but I don't think you need to be able to...
Or I shouldn't say skill. I don't think you need to have talent in those areas.
Yeah. You don't have to be the best front of house guy.
Right.
Do have to know how to use the console? Yeah. You know what
I think that'd be extremely helpful.
Like, you might not be the best director in the world, but could you plug a camera in and hit cut on the switcher? Like, I would hope so.
Yeah. I think it's good. I think it's important for like making certain calls, but then just knowing how to speak everyone's language. Ultimately, it comes down to that. Mm-hmm. You're kind of a peacekeeper. And then when things get hard, you're still a peacekeeper. Yeah. You're helping motivate or keep trying to keep the team and mindset in the right place. You know, you're the guy that has to do the follow through. Honestly, you're the follow through guy. So you got to move the needle, hit the finish line. What else can we say?
Yeah.
But literally, like, you're the finisher. So whatever it takes to be able to do that, I think is ultimately the goal of a production manager.
Yeah.
So it's like the more tools you have in your bag, then the better.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, again, I think it's okay as you're building your team for the production manager to do a role on a Sunday, like mix front of house or do lighting or be a director. I will say that it is probably the hardest for them to be the video director and the production manager on Sunday because
that's not.
The video director is the most involved role.
And most focused.
The most focused. It's easier to step away for a second from the lighting console or the front of house console because, like, lighting especially, you can leave a static look. It doesn't matter. Like, you can, whatever. And if it's time coded, who cares? It's gonna run the cues for you anyways. If you're mixing front of house, it's easy to just maybe pull your delay down for a second, have a conversation, and bring it back in. That's easy.
Yep. I think another tool to consider too when you're a production manager is understanding how to speak the language of your client. I know with some of the things that I've been able to like work on with different clients, the fact that I spoke the language of their culture made it so much better. And I'm talking like in business stuff. And I'm not a real estate investor. I would love to be, but I'm not. But I know a lot about real estate investment that most people don't know. And so I can talk with these and hang with these investors, and I know how to produce or get the result that they're looking for from me because I understand their world enough to have a conversation about it. Really practical. Whoever you're working for, I would make sure I'm investing some time. Mm-hmm. What's important to them? What are they learning? Where's their mindset at?
Yeah.
Just so that I can help bridge that gap. Super practical. But I think a lot of tech people skip over that. Mm-hmm. They only learn by what they hear. And I would just spend the time to like, where are they spending their time so that I can help build that bridge faster? And that's my strategic brain because I always am like, how do I get more out of this?
For sure.
But just a little tip for you. Also get you hired.
That's also
it gets you hired real quick. They're like, oh, wow, this guy's invested. He knows. I can take a shortcut,
Yep.
So what else? So this topic of leadership and hierarchy and who's who, what the heck does a service director do? Because I think it's pretty clear a production manager or a tech director can be super involved or really removed.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you throw in these service directors and I'm like, what exactly is that? And then you have another tech director, which is the guy who's pushing buttons on a video switcher.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
Different tech director.
So I would say, because I see this all the time when I go to different churches. I'm at different churches like almost every month. But if I walk into a church and I see that they have a really complex service and they're trying to hit times, I'm always like, all right, who's your service producer or your whatever? And they're like, show caller. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, oh, okay, you don't have one. Who is the one that's calling out transitions, what needs to go where, what microphones are on stage, that whole thing. And, a lot of times they're like, oh, it's the front house guy. It's like, or the lighting director or whatever. I go, okay. And then some churches are super, just free-flowing, and they're like, oh, we just do the same thing every weekend. It doesn't matter. Okay, I get that. And I think that a lot of times during COVID, I actually did a little bit of the service producing and production managing together. I think it can be a combo if that's your only job. But the service producer / show caller, well, I think that they could be different because a show caller usually is just going off a script and is the one calling stuff on the microphone. They don't really ever have direct communication. When we have a show caller and that's their only job, they actually never communicate with the pastors or the client. It's always the production manager updating the schedule. And
as
the show caller,
as a director, I love it.
Is just calling out what's on the schedule.
I can never, I love show flow. I can never read it.
Right. So having something like show flow, Planning Center kind of does the same thing. Google Sheet can do the same thing too. But having that schedule, I do highly recommend having your run of show for the day.
It's the language I use. Service order,
run a show. But it's doors open, or, sound check, band rehearsal, doors open, intro into worship, here's the set list with who's leading, what key, it's all there. Close worship, offering, announcements, start message, close message, ministry time, lights off. It's literally like a full run of show for the day. It helps. Show flow helps because it can track. You can have someone just track, and everyone can see where we're at in the show. That's really nice. But having that show caller that's looking at the schedule and is calling out, okay, next we have so and so coming up on this microphone to talk about announcements. There's going to be this slide, this video. Director, be ready for Super Source. Boom. Having that one person calling out all those things to everyone. Front of house guy knows, and the studio knows. Oh, we're using RF1 microphone. The director knows. Oh, I gotta have my video ready. That all helps. And then when they call for a video, having that one guy go, all right, video in 3, 2, 1. Now the lyrics or your CG op, your lyrics op can click on that video, or your media server op, whoever is doing it. Fires that video. So it takes all the guesswork out of all of the people that are working for you. So I did that as the production manager. And because I was a production manager / service producer at the same time, I was the one communicating with the pastors and then updating. I always updated the sheet, but then I always still called it out.
We also weren't used to doing that kind of thing, so the communication didn't have to be relayed that way.
Right.
So it definitely made a shortcut, allowed us to be more on the fly, especially as our team and our leaders were learning how to do it themselves.
Right. And I think that...
So it definitely can work. And we didn't have anything too complex, so pretty easy stuff.
For me, though, as a production manager, it helped because then if there were mistakes... it's easier to be like, oh, that's my bad, because my job is to fill you guys in. You know what I mean? And so if I don't do that job, then I can't get mad at you for having the wrong video or not having the video or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just and that's having that run of show beforehand allows you to go, all right, let's go check our assets. Hey, Jesse, I know we did something weird last week. Do we still have the Super Source, planned? Because we have to use it. It's like, that becomes your checklist of...
Yep, absolutely.
Hey, lyrics guy or operator, CG operator, we have these songs and these 3 videos. Are they in ProPresenter? Yep. All right, cool. It's just it becomes that checklist. So then you're not the guy oh, we don't have that video. I don't know.
I'm trying to think of... I think one of the common things is LDs... or the person in the lighting position, all the extra things can kind of start getting dumped on them. So they start doing lighting, then media for LED, which that makes sense. Then all of a sudden they're doing all these other extra things. Like maybe they start calling cues and stuff because they operate more on cues than anyone else. So I think that's one place where either the director or the LD are the two people who probably get dumped on way too many extra tasks. And the first person who should not have the extra stuff is probably the director.
Yeah, can you direct and manage the live stream comments and make sure that the feeds are going to these rooms? And
Yep. And so it just becomes way too much. And, people who have a specialized job need to focus on that one thing. especially when it affects everybody.
Yeah. And I get like budgets can be tight, but man, I highly recommend like spreading the workload out.
I mean, even my PM, technical director, shares responsibilities with a lot of people. Does some calling, like you were saying, and then doing time or cues, calls. But also sometimes helps with making sure the auxiliary streams are going, essentially. Anything special that we're doing.
Are the other rooms up and running?
Like there's no job too good, you know what I mean? Like it all just has to work. And so we do a good job of like holding each other accountable, making sure everyone's good to go and checking in. But having that redundancy there is so helpful.
Well, and he usually becomes like, if it's a staff, or like if we're staffing the, production manager role for a weekend, it's like not only are they that, they are also the stage manager. They're taking the podium up and down and making sure they have water. They're checking on the other rooms. They're also our floater, so they can, when all the guys are mid worship set and it's going and they're like, oh, we don't have sound in this room. It's like you don't have to take one of the guys, like the LD or the front of house guy, off of their job. You have that one guy that's like, oh yeah, I'll go check it.
Yeah.
Runs over there. Oh, unmute. Done.
It's just funny because that guy's usually the boss.
It is. And
it's the boss.
Again, there is no job too low, like what you said, that the boss shouldn't do.
Yeah.
I would run upstairs and turn on kids' church all the time.
So from a leadership perspective, this is probably going to get in a little long. We got to wrap this up, but I'd probably say my final thought is, as someone serving in a leadership role, my proudest moment is when I see my team completely working fluid and in sync with or without me. When it is how I want it, to the quality that I want, and I can step back and just watch it.
Yeah, you've done a good job.
I'm like, okay, we're winning and we're good. And I think that's the big thing there is every level or every tech director role or not, like LD director, whatever position you're fulfilling, even if you're the pastor, like you need to be able to have that ability. Like if you can't step back and feel proud of your team, something's got to shift in that environment, and that's a really good check, And if you're not, figure it out. It might be your problem to fix, and it might be a tech problem. But being honest with yourself, what's motivating you, and making sure that you're serving and loving people is at the top of the list. Make sure you do that, because you'll never, ever get where you want to go if you don't prioritize that.
Absolutely.
So hopefully that was helpful for some people. That was definitely just a little rant. So
wow, we talked for 40 minutes about that. Well, I hope that hopefully helps you.
Yeah.
In your journey with your staff and your pastors, and maybe hiring people, maybe using volunteers. But yeah, if you liked this content, make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening or watching.
Drake always bringing in the call to action. Good job.
It's become a habit,
Guys, thanks for being a follower and a listener, and we appreciate all your feedback.
And if you have questions that you would like us to talk about,
send them over. Yep.
Tweet us, Instagram us, whatever. We'd be happy to talk about them.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Pro Status Podcast. Be sure to go to the website and download all the episode details.